Hello, I'm Sarah. This is Hardcover Hearts, and this is my week of reading wrap-up, where I talk about the books that I read this week, what I'm currently reading, and potentially could read next week based on my mood. So if you've been following my channel, you know that I'm all over the place with my schedule right now. Apologies. I really sincerely apologize. Everything is getting a little nutty right now, and it's hard for me to keep a regular filming schedule. So I appreciate you for bearing with me. So this is a little delayed. I spent the weekend with my husband up at Sea Ranch, which is a place that I've always meant to visit. I've always wanted to go. It's up above Bodega Bay on the coast. And it's a stunning, architecturally interesting spot. There's all of these homes that have some distance between the other homes, and it's a protected area. And it's just quiet, tranquil, gorgeous, stunningly beautiful. And I had plans to just do a full reading retreat where I read until my eyes bled. I did not get a chance to do that because apparently I don't know how to relax anymore. The pandemic has killed the ability for me to just be and just relax into something. I don't know how to do it anymore. And so it took me a long time to kind of get into a new pattern and a new groove. So that was very, very unfortunate because I brought a ton of books to read and didn't really make as much progress as I had hoped. But it was still a lovely weekend, and I'm still happy I did it. I think I'm going to film a video and use some of that footage and talk a little bit about my ideas of reading retreats and how you can do them very cheaply if you don't have a lot of money and you can't travel, or what to think about in terms of a spot. What does a great reading retreat look like? So I'll do that. I'll come up with that a little later. In the interim, let's talk about the books I read because I did read some amazing books last week. So the first one I read for Shorty September. And I will say Charco Press just hit it out of the park again. This is a work in translation. This is called Elena Nose by Claudia Piñeiro and translated by Francis Riddle. Let me show you the cover. They just do phenomenal, interesting books. So apparently, Claudia Piñeiro is Argentina's crime writer extraordinaire. And I had never heard of her, but I was looking for a mystery, and this was billed as a mystery where a woman's adult daughter has died. And our main character is convinced that her daughter died of mysterious circumstances and it was murder. However, the police are equally convinced that it was death by suicide. What makes this book, already you've got that tension, that conflict, but what makes this book amazing is we get the relationship between these two adult women, which was difficult and biting and loving, but it was a caretaker relationship. So Rita, the daughter, has been taking care of Elena because Elena has Parkinson's, and she has a particularly aggressive form of Parkinson's where she doesn't get the tremble, but she will freeze. Her body will freeze up, and she is unable to move anything. It makes it very, very hard for both of them, and their life is very difficult. We see Elena as an old woman that this has just happened to, who is still very convinced and very forceful despite her frailty and her illness. And she is determined that she's going to figure out what happened and she's going to solve this case. There is one person who can help her, and this is a person that owes her family a debt, and she's going to call this debt in. But in order to do so, she has to travel across town. Now, normally that's not a big deal, but in her case, she has to time every single leg of this trip perfectly because of her medication. She has to take a medicine, and that medicine then, in essence, unlocks her ability to move. But it only lasts for a certain amount of time. But she needs to do this, and she's convinced that this person will and can help her. So it's poignant. It is incredibly tactile. It is so sad. It is infuriating. It's really an indictment, a devastating, thought-provoking indictment about the hypocrisy of churches, of society, and how we treat the elderly, how we treat those who are disabled. The climax of this book blew my mind. As if it wasn't already phenomenal, it amped it up like notches. Phenomenal, feminist, strong, amazing read. And there is a very thought-provoking afterword in this book that helps to contextualize some of the things that were talked about in the novel. I cannot rave about this enough. In fact, it gave me a lot of vibes similar to The Lady and the Little Fox Fur by Violette LeDuc. And this is translated by Derek Coltman. Both of these books are about older women, and they both evoked that same physicality. This one was about extreme poverty, and this one about Parkinson's. Great reads. I cannot more highly recommend both of them. Okay, so that was Shorty September, which was giving so many amazing books this September. Thank you, Sean, Bert, and Heather for thinking about that and dreaming it up. I'll put links to their channels below. Then this was part of my Year of Reading by Shakespeare and Company. This was a bundle set that you get, comes out 3 times a year. My husband got it for me as a Christmas gift. And so I just got the last of the bundle, and I put a video to the unboxing of it. So check that out if you're interested. But this was Intimacies by Kitamura. And I think I showed Open Water last week, and it had something similar in that it was signed. Now this is signed the old-fashioned way with an actual signature and not a plate in here. So obviously she was there. And look at the amazing little bookmark that they bring, nice little dog there. So I read her previous book, Separation. And what Kitamura does very well, she does this cool remove, this distanced view that comes off a little cold, a little sophisticated. It's an outsider view that also feels, I don't want to say it feels snobby, but it definitely feels like your narrator is pulling back, is introverted, is not engaged, and is just observing and watching. And the same thing was true here. Now, what's interesting is some people that I really trust their judgment did not like this. So I think it made the bar a little lower for me, which allowed me to come in a little higher. I went in expecting really great things, but then when I heard it's not so good, I think that freed me a little bit. So it's funny when that happens, right? This is set in The Hague, and our main narrator is a translator, and she's translating in the war crimes in the justice system at The Hague. And she also is new in The Hague. She is living there. She feels a little bit out of place. She started a relationship, but she's kind of on tenuous terms. She didn't realize that he was separated from his wife when they started dating. And it's left her a little precarious. So there's a lot of imbalances going on in her life. And that's kind of the centerpiece of this story. Now, if you need your books to wrap up neatly and all the things to be ticked and tied, you're not gonna be satisfied with this. But if you enjoy going along and experiencing some interesting locales and some interesting thoughts and characters along the way, this might be something that you enjoy. I particularly found the pieces about translating in The Hague and in the war crimes, and she actually meets a leader of a country that has been brought to The Hague to basically be on trial for war crimes. And that experience of translating and the intimacy that translating creates threw her off balance. And it's very funny because one of the things that I wanted to do when I was young was I was very interested in human rights. And that was one avenue I could have pursued. The other one that I was interested in was languages. And I lived on the East Coast, so most of the work would have been with the State Department, would have been in diplomacy, would have been in these types of translation, as opposed to what now just seems so obvious, like literary translation. I should have done that. It didn't even dawn on me. So anyway, I enjoyed it for that because that's kind of a road not traveled. But I enjoyed this. I didn't love it, but it definitely was interesting. And there's a lot going on. There's a lot plot-wise, but it doesn't necessarily propel itself forward. So I would love to know if you've read this and what your thoughts were on that. Okay. Next up, I listened to, this came from my public library. I had an opportunity to get Matrix by Lauren Groff. Now, I have Fates and Furies. I got this when it came out, and this also is signed. There was a launch party that she did, and so I ended up getting it personally signed to me, which was quite lovely. And I enjoyed this very much. I liked the setup and how it was constructed. I like the kind of the flipping of the narration. So Matrix is historical fiction with a very strong main character who is a young woman. The story goes that this is a young woman who was kicked out of court by Eleanor of Aquitaine for kind of being not worthy of being at the court for a myriad of different reasons. But she is incredibly skilled. She's almost too skilled. I'll talk about that in a minute. But she is sent to a convent, to an abbey. And this abbey is run down. It's incredibly impoverished. This is almost a death sentence. And she's shocked by the conditions, but one of the skills that she has is that she was able to live on her property that her mother owned for a good amount of time after her mother died, because no one realized that her mother had passed away because she was running things so efficiently. She was also a child in the Crusades and has this kind of warrior spirit about her. So we have an interesting character here, very headstrong, but also a big woman who's not very, not dainty, not beautiful, but a strong-willed, strong character. So much of this book is about the ins and outs of monastic life during this time. And it's kind of like a life story of Marie as she's kind of learning about how to live here in this monastery, bringing things, new innovation and changes, and getting this monastery back on its feet. The challenges and politics that go along with that. It's kind of a life story. It's also the relationships that happen in this kind of cloistered environment, which I always like those kinds of stories. It was incredibly well written, but there was something lacking. Like it wasn't propulsive. I don't think this is going to stay with me any longer than a couple more weeks, maybe. It was just a fine book, but not necessarily what I expected, especially with all the hype around it. I think that's what I'm going to say about this. Fine story, but I didn't love it. Also true about a buddy read that I did. I did this with Natalie of A Curious Reader. She and I are reading Magda Szabó's work. And last time we read Abigail, which was outstanding, just phenomenal read. Speaking of a convent / kind of cloistered life, this one was Catalan Street. And this is translated by Len Ricks. And she is so smart and such a great person to do buddy reads with. So picks up things that I don't see, which is just phenomenal. Exactly what you want, right? So in this book, we have a family that is, I think I mentioned the last time we spoke that this family felt very confusing. There's a lot of characters and the interrelationships between them is not clear. They're all living in a small apartment in Hungary, in Budapest. And there was a number of voices, and each chapter would be a different person. And so we were getting this revolving look at and rotating POV of points of view about the events that were being discussed. And what it comes to be is that this is really about a family and that had their heart and soul at a place called Catalan Street, which was their previous home. And on Catalan Street, they had almost like a triplex. There were 3 homes that were their family and then 2 very close friends and their families. So these 3 families kind of grew up together and bought the homes next to each other and were raising their children together. And the children, there were 2 girls, 2 sisters, Irene and Blanca, a girl next door who was an only child, Henriette, and then Violette, who lived on the other side. And Violette was the major's son. What ends up happening is what we're being told is the story of the horrors of what happened to Jewish families during the war, during World War II. And then in essence, a look, a kind of abstracted discussion about Hungary and the history of Hungary through the characters. And so Natalie and I were talking, we're like, well, who's the main character here? Because it kept shifting and changing. And that's at the end, we were like, oh, I don't think any of them were the main characters. I think this is meant to be a story that gives us understanding about Hungary. And maybe the state of deterioration of Hungary is represented through these characters and the way they became kind of deadened and passive and allowed life to just happen to them as opposed to having any kind of agency or free will. It was a dark book. Now, Magda Szabó can write. That woman is an amazing writer. But the subject matter and the ending just created a very tense, very frustrating, very depressing read. So she still is magnificent, and I can't wait to read the last of that we have in translation from her, that at least was translated into English. And so she and I will be reading that sometime before the end of the year. But this of the 3 that I've read so far, Abigail's number 1, The Door, very close, 1.5 maybe. This is the 3rd in line for sure. Okay, so let's talk about what I'm currently reading. I did read actually a good amount of Proust while I was on that vacation. So that was wonderful. So I'm past the halfway point on Proust and then continuing. This is In Search of Lost Time, Volume 3, The Guermantes Way. And I think I sometimes forget to say who translated this, which is very bad of me. This was translated by Mark Treharne. Then I'm almost done with Orlando. I'm reading this with Elizabeth the Bookish North. And I did also read this while I was there. And it was definitely more interesting in the section that we read now. I'm gonna hold off because I need to check in with Elizabeth on this section. But expect a full wrap up next time because we will be finishing it by then. Then I'm also reading for my In Real Life book club. We're reading the Women's Prize shortlist. And so Unsettled Ground is what we need to read next by Claire Fuller. Just started it, and I have to say it's a really powerful start to that book. And then I really missed and needed something. I really needed kind of a mystery. And so Death in the East, number 4 by Abir Mukherjee. This is the Sam Wyndham series that I enjoy so much. It's set in colonial India, but with a strong anti-colonial thrust to it. The characters are great. The writing is propulsive, and it's a good palate cleanser for all of the meaty, heady stuff that I've been reading. I'll be very sad to say goodbye to Shorty September because it's been an absolute joy. Again, thank you to Bert and Sean of Past Story Time and to Heather from Soggy Expat Book Nerd. I'll put both channels below. It was just a joy and delight. I do love a good novella. And then it's time to prep for Victober and Black British History Month. So I'm going to start to think about what I want to read for that. And I know the clock is ticking, so I need to get to that soon. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Please, as always, we're still in a global pandemic. So if you can get vaccinated, please do. Maintain safe social distance, wear your mask, wash your hands, don't touch your face, and I'll look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.